What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I got a few late night thoughts I want to get off before I go to sleep about Notre Dame's decision to opt out of their bowl game and why BYU got left out of the playoffs and they didn't receive the same treatment from the committee that Alabama did. If you live, eat, breathe, and die football, congratulations, you have come to the right place. We're talking college football, NFL, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you are a football junkie like me, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. We're not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find JT Sports on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. JT Sports is available. The links are down in the pinned comment and description down below. We would greatly appreciate it if you give us a 5-star review. Helps us out a lot. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews by the end of this year. So go ahead, give us a 5-star review if you enjoy, and let's dive into it. Notre Dame has took their ball and went home after they got left out of the college football playoffs. They made the decision to opt out of their bowl game, which they were projected to play in the Pop-Tart Bowl against BYU. Now, I love the Pop-Tart Bowl. The Pop-Tart Bowl is my favorite bowl game of all time. When they have the little Pop-Tart mascot coming out the toaster, and then at the end of the game, whoever wins it is able to eat the Pop-Tart mascot. The Pop-Tart Bowl should end up being a New Year's Six bowl game, because with the playoffs expanding from 4 teams to 12, you have made bowl season extinct. There's no incentive to playing in bowl season anymore. If you make it to a bowl game, essentially what that is a participation trophy. We appreciate you for playing this season. You weren't good enough to make it into the CFP, so we're going to allow you to play one more game so you can go out on a high note to end this season. And Notre Dame pretty much gave the committee the middle finger by opting out of their bowl game, because they said, why would we play in a bowl game that everybody views as meaningless when all we've done is made this sport about making it to the college football playoffs? If you don't make it to the playoffs, or you're not in the mix to get in, you're viewed as irrelevant. Nobody talks about you. Nobody pays attention to you. So all we've done by expanding the playoffs is dilute this sport so much, to the point not only is Notre Dame opting out of their bowl game, but so has Kansas State and Baylor. And other teams are going to continue this trend till we get to the point when bowl season is going to be completely eradicated and it'll be nothing more than a mystery. And the more you expand the playoffs, whether you go to 14 teams, 16 teams, or 32 teams, the more you continue to diminish the value of bowl season. When we just had 2 teams selected for the national championship during the BCS era, it was a lot different back then. Because even if you didn't get to the BCS championship game, playing in the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Peach Bowl, those were still bowl games that had a lot of prestige around them. Because, yes, everybody wants to get a national championship, but since making it to the national championship was so difficult and it was very exclusive, more teams felt inclined to be okay with playing in a major bowl game. But now, with playoffs expansion and the coverage around college football solely being based on the playoffs, if you make it to a bowl game, nobody on ESPN is congratulating you for doing so. Nobody covers bowl season like that. And most of the times, these players, even if they are seniors and they might have played their last game during the regular season, they really could care less about playing in a bowl game at this point. They probably would just want to start their preparation for the NFL draft, fly back home, and spend that time with their family versus practicing for a glorified exhibition game. That's what these bowl games are. Bowl games, to us as fans, are great entertainment. But to the teams playing in them, they're meaningless. They're not really getting anything out of them outside of more development for some of the younger players on the roster who could end up starting. Bowl momentum doesn't matter. Florida won their bowl game last year. They won the ReliQuest Bowl. And what happened after that this season? They were a huge disappointment. Billy Napier, he didn't even survive the whole entire season. So bowl games are just entertainment. They bring in a lot of money and revenue for the sport. They give us something to watch when the season is over. But other than that, if you're Notre Dame and you're a big brand, you're a blue blood program, playing in the Pop-Tart Bowl kind of is a stain on your credibility. It's a stain on the view of your program from a national scope because you weren't good enough to make it to the college football playoffs, and you have to be okay with playing in the Pop-Tart Bowl after you felt you got snubbed. It's not about entitlement. There are other teams not named Notre Dame that decided to opt out of playing in a bowl game. Nobody's talking about Baylor and Kansas State opting out of their bowl games because they're not Notre Dame. And it's easy to take shots at Notre Dame because they're the most overhated program in college football. But Notre Dame, them choosing not to play in the Pop-Tart Bowl is understandable because with the expansion of the college football playoffs, now it's playoffs or bust. If you're not in the playoffs, you're irrelevant. Nobody cares about you. Nobody's talking about you. So if we have made this sport so much about playoffs or bust, then what's the point of playing in these bowl games? Play for pride, play for respect. Nobody's going to talk about Notre Dame winning or losing the Pop-Tart Bowl once next season comes around. It's just something to talk about during the off season. Either you lose your bowl game and people use that as a negative going into the off season, or you win your bowl game and people view it as a reason to be hopeful for next year, even though it really is false hope. Bowl momentum doesn't matter. Rather you win your bowl game or not, there's not really a lot of incentive to really play in them anymore. And eventually we will get to the point when you're going to have so many teams opting out of these bowl games to the point bowl season is going to be completely extinct. And maybe you'll have to come up with what the NCAA has for March Madness. If you don't get into that, you go to the NIT. Maybe you could make a secondary playoffs where the teams that got left out of the main playoffs, maybe they would be willing to play in a secondary playoffs if you offer them a financial incentive to do so. Maybe you get less opt-outs and it gives people more football to watch. I love the Pop-Tart Bowl, but I understand why Notre Dame will be opposed to not wanting to play in it. Notre Dame wasn't the only noteworthy team that got left out of the playoffs that felt they deserved a spot in the dance. BYU, they played in their conference championship game. They lost to Texas Tech, but they didn't get in. Alabama did, though. Why is it? Is it SEC bias? No. It's because the committee doesn't respect the runner-up in the Big 12 Conference. BYU didn't have the same argument for getting in the playoffs as what Alabama did. Before Alabama played in the SEC championship game, they were already a top 10 team. BYU was 11th. And if you included JMU and Tulane, they were on the outside looking in of the playoffs. So essentially, BYU playing in their conference championship game was a play-in game. And what we don't want to admit is that not all conferences in college football are created equal. Playing in the SEC championship gets you more respect from the committee than what it does you playing in the Big 12 championship. Alabama also lost to the same team, although in blowout fashion, that they beat in their home turf earlier this season. So Alabama didn't get swept by Georgia like how BYU got swept by Texas Tech the two times they played. The games weren't even close. Bama also had the third toughest schedule in America. They were third in strength of schedule. BYU was 16th in strength of schedule. BYU And any other team that's playing in the Big 12 or the ACC, for them to get more respect from the committee when it comes to playoff scenarios like this, when you're making an argument for a non-Power 2 conference team getting in over somebody like Bama, you got to play a tough out-of-conference schedule. If BYU would have played Notre Dame earlier this season, and let's say they won that game, then they would have been in the playoffs. Miami is the perfect example of this. Miami knows that the ACC has a low reputation in the eyes of the playoff committee. So instead of Miami banking on getting lucky, crossing their fingers that a few ACC teams they play will be ranked, they ended up scheduling Notre Dame for their out-of-conference matchup in week 1. And with them winning that game, it was able to help them overcome them playing in a weak conference. That's what a lot of these Big 12 teams and ACC programs have to do moving forward to overcompensate for the lack of respect that their conferences get, for a very good reason. The champion of the ACC was a 5-loss Duke team. The Big 12 champion was a Texas Tech team that had the most expensive roster in college football outside of Texas. Texas Tech got the best roster that money could buy. BYU had no shot being able to compete with Texas Tech. It also didn't help that they only had 1 ranked win as opposed to Alabama, who have 4 ranked wins. Now, you can argue semantics, or the SEC's overrated. There's a bunch of SEC teams that were ranked high that didn't deserve to be ranked that high. Same thing with the Big 12. Iowa State was ranked this year, and they finished outside of the top 25. And that was a team that BYU beat. The Big 12 just isn't on the same level as the SEC. I know when you watch these games, you view it as football. As long as you're suiting up the same way, you put your pads on the same way, football is football. Everybody's results, everybody's schedules, everybody's conferences should be viewed the same. But all these conferences aren't equal. And nobody wants to admit that. If you're a fan of BYU, you're going to make the argument why you deserve to get more respect playing in the Big 12. If you're a fan of Alabama, you're going to make the argument that we're playing in the best conference in college football. The SEC puts more players into the NFL than any other conference. They also recruit better than any of the major Power 4 conferences also. So let's not pretend like the Big 12 is on the same level as the Big 10 and the SEC. I'm not trying to throw out hypotheticals, but I'm just going off the logic of the playoff committee. The playoff committee doesn't respect the Big 12 runner-up as much as how they respect Alabama being the runner-up in the toughest conference in college football. Now, if BYU would have beat Texas Tech during the regular season, but got blown out by them in their conference championship game, then they would have had a stronger argument, because you would have the right to say that we be the top 10 team. But if we're going off resume, comparing Alabama's resume to BYU's resume is night and day. Alabama has more stronger wins. They can say we beat Georgia, which was the best win in college football this season. They gave Georgia their first home loss in half a decade. BYU doesn't have another win as impressive as what Alabama's win over Georgia is. And just because you get to your conference championship game and you lose doesn't guarantee you a spot in the playoffs. It just so happened that Alabama was already a playoff team when they got to their conference championship game. BYU was not. Alabama wasn't playing in the play-in game when they were walking into the SEC championship. BYU was. They had to win their Big 12 championship game to get in the college football playoffs. And for those saying that, well, the runner-up in the SEC, if they get in the playoffs, the same thing should go for every other conference. Okay, if Texas Tech would have lost to BYU, both BYU and Texas Tech would have gotten in. It's not more so a SEC bias thing. It's more so a scheduling conflict. And it's a depth of conference issue. The Big 12 doesn't have as many quality teams as what the SEC has, which is why it's very important that teams playing in the ACC, the Big 12, schedule very good out-of-conference opponents. Because if you schedule a respectable out-of-conference opponent and you beat them, then that loss can help boost up your resume. So when you do end up getting snubbed in favor of Alabama or somebody else who lost in their conference championship, you can say, hey, we got a very good out-of-conference win. And that helps your strength of schedule, and it helps the committee's perception when it comes to viewing you as one of the 12 best teams in the sport. I don't view BYU as one of the best 12 teams in college football. There's nothing about their resume, there's nothing about their body of work that says that they were. You can get mad all you want to and cry about it and tweet all night about it if you're BYU's athletic department, but crying isn't going to make the committee change their stance, change their viewpoint about how they see you and your conference. And the Big 12 is the second weakest Power 4 conference in college football. The only conference behind it is the ACC. Miami didn't make it to their conference championship game. They solely got into the playoffs off their win over Notre Dame, who was a top 10 team entering this season. That is what carried Miami throughout this season. Despite their schedule not being that tough, they could hang their hat on them beating a top 10 team in week 1 because they did a very smart thing of scheduling a very formidable out-of-conference opponent. And that's what BYU and a bunch of other teams who don't play in the SEC or the Big 12 have to do.